for me, it feels like that the L14 as a project has been beautifully executed as per the project brief. Except the project brief was to blend in and don't outshine the T14. Okay, there, I said it. So firstly, it's a really big thank you that we've managed to reach the 500 subscriber count. So we're really happy about that. It's still a tiny channel, but it's getting slightly larger each time. So secondly, I think we've received some comments that the audio quality in the early videos could be better. Message noted. It's obviously we hope that what is said here is going to be more important than how it's said or in what sound quality is said in. But obviously it's something that we hope to improve, so really appreciate your patience. Thank you. We're here to look at the Lenovo ThinkPad L14 with the AMD Ryzen processor. I think of the L14 as a more price-accessible machine than the T14. There's some constraints, for instance, the plastic case material, fewer display options, and also the standard warranty in some regions are slightly shorter. That said, at the moment, it's the only AMD Ryzen-powered ThinkPad with 2 RAM slots, which are both user accessible. So I think let's take a look. I'm probably over-reading this, but the sheer act of trying to find the L series was reflective enough for me of its positioning. So X1, X, T, P, E, these are the popular ones. I've actually got to click View O just to see the L series. So in some ways, for the consumers, it's certainly a more hidden product. To be fair, the Yuga is also here, so perhaps it's just marketing people decided that's the way it is. Aligned to the rear right corner, the L14 on the bottom is going to be a little bit longer than the T14 on the top, as you can see, otherwise not much difference. Next to a T14 which has better screen to body ratio, the L14 is no doubt starting to look a little bit tired. Whilst the bezel is not massive, it's nonetheless a throwback to perhaps 2015-2016. The number of ports overall are more or less the same on the L14 as it is on the T14. However, the placement are a little bit different. As you can see from the smart card, Ethernet and SIM card, the SIM card slot is more accessible. However, it's not sealed, so it's possible for more dust to get in. There seems to be a very small difference in output capability between the L14 and the T14, even though they're both the AMD model. Hopefully, in the future, we'll see more Thunderbolt on the ThinkPad laptops with AMD. Unlike the T14 here, the L series has the SIM card tray on the left-hand side. Ports are quite predictable on the other side. We just wanted to show you this angle with the L series on the bottom. So as you can see, it's definitely quite noticeable. Perhaps due to a thicker chassis, the L series has deeper vents, which isn't as long, whereas T series' vent stops here and is more long to compensate for this. Back to back, it looks like the L series may need a diet. Now the front-on-front angle, I suppose it's going to be really easy to figure out which one is the L14, just in case I'm pointing at it. Just a quick heads up, if you're considering the L14 or 15, it would be very easy to leave micro scratches on the lid, so it's probably a good idea to get either a skin or a very good bag or sleeve. It just compares less durably with the T series. On the inside, it very much appears to be business as usual. Distinctive ThinkPad design language. On the top, you can see Windows IR webcam. It's fairly easy to use. Privacy switch is fairly clicky. It covers a normal webcam and doesn't seem to cover the other IR webcam. The display, will go into that in a moment. We've already had a quick chat about the bezel. As with most laptops with a smart card, there's some hollowness in comparison to the more solid other aspects of the laptop. I think it's quite normal. ThinkPads, they're generally known for their very good keyboard. I think this one is very good as well. We've had to reset it a little bit and now it's much quieter than before, so we're quite happy about that. One thing we did notice, it's probably an isolated glitch again, is that you can hear this side is more noisy than the right-hand side. I don't really know why, if it's intentional. Maybe it's just variation. I think it's quite easy to fix if you undo the track button and adjust it underneath a little bit. But to be honest, this is not something that really should be on a brand new laptop. The palm rest texture seems to be decent.
It's not quite as nice as more rubberized feel of T-Series. I think I really like the T-Series more. This one is a little bit more resistant in comparison to the more smooth rubber feel. Fingerprint sensor, it's going to be good to have in addition to the Windows Hello camera. The bezel comes off very easily, especially in comparison to the T-Series. The T-Series has a stick-on bezel, which usually you need to replace after servicing the screen. Whereas on this one, the bezel, you take it off and you put it back on. Very straightforward if the screen ever needs to be replaced. The base screws on the L14 appears to come out more easily than the T14, so just keep an eye so you don't lose them. Within Lenovo's Ryzen-powered ThinkPad lineup, the L14 is going to be one of the more performant ones available, as you can see from the dual heat pipe design of the heatsink. Helps to dissipate loss of heat. Dual RAM slots. This is going to be helpful if you want to upgrade RAM, or alternatively, save a little bit money upfront, knowing that you have the expansion there. Thankfully, the Wi-Fi card is not soldered on the motherboard. We've got the 4G on this particular model, but we don't know if the wiring is going to be on there for all the different models. As you can see, 45 watt-hour battery is about 10% smaller than the T14, but it's still decently large size. On the right-hand side, this is not going to give you enough space to fit a 2.5 inch. These ridges are going to help the structural rigidity of the right-hand side of the palm rest. So this is an M2 design going forward. If some people were to run external graphics through the M2, then this positioning makes it one of the easier ones to modify. But of course, we don't really talk about that on our channel. Just one last small thing, which is the right-hand side USB port and one audio jack. Thankfully, that's a daughter board. So if that side goes, you can, in theory, just replace this tiny bit of the board. Whereas on the other side, it's a part of the motherboard. So perhaps using the right-hand side USB is a sensible idea where you can. The backlight certainly helps you when you're reading in the dark. We're on the mid-brightness level. There's one higher level and off setting. At the first glance, you'll notice that the L series has more bright backlight. But when you look deeper, you'll see that there's more leakage around the side, especially in comparison to the T14. And if we switch on to the higher brightness, first on the T series and then on the L series, you'll see that the T series has a same lower leakage, but the backlight is not as bright, whereas the leakage on the L series is definitely very noticeable. The Lenovo is known to multi-source their keyboard, and I don't know if this is a variation, but the difference is certainly very visible. When you have the keyboard on the minimum setting, the T-series backlight level is probably more gentle on the eyes and more considerate, whereas the L series in reality probably needs a lower level. It will be interesting if eventually the brightness control for the keyboard moves to sensor-based solution, but I think we're not expecting that for a while, so for now, this is perfectly fine.
So the speaker, it works with everyday stuff. Obviously could do with more bass, but this is business laptop, so manage the expectations. Always the options of external speakers or headphones. Switching on the Dolby software, it does help to mask the smaller speaker on this laptop. Hey people, so we're looking at the webcam footage. So it's 720p webcam and we're being lit by two of the 15 watts LED lights. So reasonably well lit. And obviously it's nobody quite saw the COVID thing coming. So I think we didn't really think that this would be the year of teleconferencing. And obviously I think next year there's probably going to be a big jump in laptop webcam qualities. But until then, let's just quickly take a look. So if you look at the seat in this bit, the amount of detail you can see resolved is, could be better. And the shirt, it's interesting. It's the shadow is not quite there, but I think the facial feature, I think, it's generally fine. If we just move it a little bit, you can see the detail that's being rendered there at the center of the frame is a little bit fuzzy, but that part is darker. And of course, like the last time, if we just remove one of the lights, so you will see noise suddenly appearing on the corner and where it's darker. And I think we don't need to try to remove the other light this time because it's just it doesn't pick up much. But yeah, no, it's webcam. It's switching the webcam back. It's perfectly functional. It's passable quality for 2020, but I suspect many people will be wanting a better external camera like or Logitech or Microsoft or something similar that helps them to appear well in webcam teleconferencing. Looking at the display options, I suppose it's a reflection on just how well Lenovo has segmented the E series, the L series, and the T series. The 250 nits which we have here is decent for the indoor getting started, and obviously if you have a second or third external monitor. I think that's going to help quite a bit. There's also a touchscreen option. It's not protected by glass, so it's just use it gently as usual. Lastly, some of the L series buyers still are more price conscious, so they might bulk buy. If it comes to it, L series is still preferable to the E series in some aspects. It might be that they already have external screen setup, go with more cost-conscious route of the TN panel. So if you pay with your own money, you probably focus more on the IPS panel options. The bezel is not actually too hard to remove, so it might be eventually you can service it yourself. But I think that has impact on the warranty.
The L series traditionally differentiate through offering less expensive display options and sometimes not as many high-end ones. The 250 nits display with the 45% color gamut helps to get things done in the everyday office tasks. And when you are in a darker environment, it's possible to dim this display down substantially. Both displays here are on the lowest display setting. Whilst it would be useful to have the 400 nits option, it's perhaps a corner that the L series cut for this generation, so we're not expecting for them to put it on. It would be a nice surprise if they do. The viewing angle, generally speaking, is very good, so if we look at it from almost upright position, it retains some of the color accuracy, which is very good. If we just rotate the laptop to the side, as you can see, it retains some of the color accuracy. There's a very minimal degree of backlight leak along the side. I think this is something that varies depending on the panel that you get. The color is decent. It's not the most vibrant panel, but I think as per the 45% color gamut, you can't probably expect too much. The higher color gamut options seem to be limited to the T series and the X1 Carbon if you want the really stunning Dolby Vision screen. So as you can see, keeps the viewing angle very decently. And if we rotate it again, sorry for the noise, you can see from the side it's still very good. We're just being cheeky now, but I'll switch it back. It would be nice eventually when we do have the 120Hz display refresh rate on the ThinkPads. So use your medium workload, so 5 tabs refreshing every 20 seconds each. YouTube 1080p and also the Spotify playing in the background. Speakers are off, backlit keypad is off. Just get a sense of the battery. When we run this, we've got 3.5 hours before Windows shut itself at 6% battery. Generally, it's okay. It's a little bit shorter than what you have on the X13, but that's understandable. On the inside, similar places heats up, but not as much as when it's under heavy workload. During the medium workload, the base also shows some heat, but it's quite manageable, as you can see here. We've been running Heaven Benchmark for about half an hour now. This creates a less good case scenario in terms of the heat. As you can see, this area and right edge gets somewhat hot. The center of the keyboard also gets somewhat warm. The front, thankfully, is not as hot. The base cover does get quite hot on the CPU plus GPU workload. You can clearly see where the RAM slots are, and also how effective the fan is in terms of pulling air from the base. This is probably close to worst case estimate in terms of temperature. If you're gaming or running CPU plus GPU stuff, it might be useful to put it on a desk or laptop cooler. Generally covering the performance seems to be up there in line with the T14. We've already discussed the TDP on this unit seemed to be allowed to run a little bit higher. It didn't translate into much real-world difference for the T14. R20, the full performance mode, was where the results were quite easily replicable. At the lower power settings, we did have a slight difficulty replicating the results after the first few runs. It tends to spike in the first run and then drop down. So I think that was interesting. We didn't see as much of that in the T series when we looked previously. The BIOS is probably still really early, so it's probably a little bit unfair to comment on this variation as a quality of the item. On this workload specifically, we didn't have much edge over the T14. Interpretation of that could be that we're quite close to what the fan can get rid of in terms of dissipating the heat. In the R15, impressive results again, and as we mentioned previously, it doesn't really exceed the T14. It's not something that you would expect for a more budget-friendly laptop to perform better. We've also run the Geekbench 5. This is average results. Similar phenomenon as in the R20. On the full performance level, we're quite replicable. So this is when you turn it on to the max, essentially.
but on the lower power settings, had some difficulty in replicating the results after the first few runs to more extent than what we've seen on the other ThinkPads. Of course, just to say the results are still great. Expect the usual performance degradation when you move to the battery. In Geekbench 5, we tested a few different RAMs to see if they made an impact, and I think they definitely did. The single channel, it clearly doesn't perform quite as well, so if you do go for the single channel, you're leaving more performance on the table. Dual channel paired RAM seems to be the strong options here, so either 8, 16, 32, 64. And when we mix different size of the 3200, I think Geekbench didn't quite like it as much, but it was better than single channel. One casual observation is that it does really well compared to the T14 and relative to expectation. For us, this is a business laptop, so we didn't do much 3D testing here. But the Heaven benchmark that we've run, you do get quite a noticeable bump from the single channel to do, so make the most of it if you intend to do 3D stuff. Looking at the 8+16 RAM option, I think it's actually stronger than what we thought it would be here. Because the TDP seems to be sometimes allowed to run a little bit higher on this laptop versus, let's say, a T14, if you run both CPU and GPU, I would imagine there might be some slight marginally more headroom. One last observation, we're still on really early BIOS, but we did sometimes see isolated performance dropping quite substantially. So as soon as you start the computer, it's fine. I think in those scenarios, a future BIOS update would improve the system stability. Let's wrap it up. So for me, the L14 is a little bit hard to pigeonhole unless we also think of the T14. By that I mean the T14 is more known quantity, more people probably knows what it does. L series is just a differentiation on that. With the T series, Lenovo has probably reached the optimal price point that is benchmarked well against the competition and at the same time is comfortable for them. I suppose that's where the L14 comes in. It's for the people buying it. They're potentially more budget constrained, or they have to bulk buy something and this is a number of machines they have to get. So they're open to a slightly less premium finish, things like fewer display options, more customized warranty duration. In that sense, it reinforces the fact that L14 is probably more enterprise facing. You're probably not as likely to see this out there in the open. Focusing on the theme of a more limited budget, I think that's where the pricing and also the specification of the L14 really matters. Because as soon as you start thinking about where it differentiates primarily with the T series, which is a shorter warranty, then as soon as you add those options onto the machine, or bigger SSD, Ryzen 7 onto it, then the price just really creeps up. With the 2 RAM slots, I think that's really cool point. I think that's more focused around affordability in that their IT department can just put in RAM sticks themselves. The optionality for 64GB of RAM does not necessitate that majority of the user would have it. Obviously, I know there's one of you out there watching and you probably have sitting on the L14 with 64GB of RAM and saying, I'm here! But obviously for more people, it's the 16 and 32 are probably by far more likely, I reckon. Don't quote me. Obviously mixing with some humor. It's almost as if in Intro to Economics, this would be classically what you would call inferior good. So basically, if your income increases, you consume less of it. What we mean by that is compared to a more desirable T14 with the low power display, things like a slightly thinner and just a little bit more premium finish. It's clear to see that. But this is not meant to sound implied, obviously. Completely wrapping it up, I think in real world usage, I think for me, the things I spotted is the lid, it just scratches a little bit more easily than I would have liked. So a case is definitely important, as we've already mentioned. Otherwise, still really early days for the BIOS, so hopefully after a few BIOS updates, it runs even more stably. Generally seems to be a good system. I think we're probably not going to do a L15 review ourselves. It's just too similar for us. The L14 is like a stretch machine. Maybe the E series might be interesting. Anyway, we hope this has been helpful. Any question, just drop it down in the comments. Thanks.